It's the best course I've ever done. And I dislike online learning, but this has really changed my mind about it.
Honestly, much more empowered and much more capable, and all these things that I really actually have something amazing to offer my clients.
Basically, my capacity for my clients is so much bigger. And like the last person said, just giving that presence to them is such a gift that, I've trained in EMDR and all these modalities and, feel safe with the ocean, a safe place and this and that. But this is like bringing it home, like feel safe in your body.
With clients with chronic conditions who have often exhausted turning everywhere. And I support them in rewiring their nervous systems as a holistic part of their healing.
Dr. Amy, you've truly, truly changed my life. Truly, you have. Truly. You've changed me as a parent. You've changed me professionally. And you've healed me the fastest I've ever been healed. And I'm not saying I'm done, but the quantum shift I've experienced, really, it's speechless.
I've talked about the states of the nervous system with patients. I've gone over somatic exercises with patients that have had trauma. I am so excited to talk about the role of inflammation and those adaptive immune patterns, which I see in just about everybody I see, and just kind of that role of inflammation and what that looks like from a, kind of a blood sugar diet, movement, spending time in nature, the things that I can actually influence.
And I'm so thankful for all the other stuff that I know, but I honestly just really feel like this is the one thing they need to know.
I don't know. It's like the best. I tell people, this is the best thing since sliced bread.
Discovering your work and fully embracing it myself has significantly expanded my capacity in all regards.
I have spent far too much time. I shouldn't admit how much time I've spent truly thinking, God, I love that woman. I love that woman. I love that woman.
The way I frame things with my clients of how overwhelming the world is for a baby. And when they realize that, especially the people that think, oh, I'm fine, my parents were fine. And it's like they realize the level of compassion that they have for themselves goes deeper. And then that becomes very healing for them. And understanding how the neurobiology takes time to develop, and rushing anything just as we're doing as adults, trying to rush our healing. That's not how we're wired in the beginning.
My clients know so much about you because they're like, how do you know all this? You're not a doctor. Because they ask me if I'm a doctor, and I'm like, no, I'm not a doctor, but my lingo has changed completely. Each module has helped me as a person, as a mother, as a wife, and especially as a counselor.
I thank you for all of this. It's amazing, and it helps my patients every day. And if I can just be a baby step for someone, like I said, I can see the hope in their eyes, and that's pretty wonderful.
It's the best course I've ever done. And I dislike online learning, but this has really changed my mind about it.
Honestly, much more empowered and much more capable, and all these things that I really actually have something amazing to offer my clients.
Basically, my capacity for my clients is so much bigger. And like the last person said, just giving that presence to them is such a gift that, I've trained in EMDR and all these modalities and, feel safe with the ocean, a safe place and this and that. But this is like bringing it home, like feel safe in your body.
With clients with chronic conditions who have often exhausted turning everywhere. And I support them in rewiring their nervous systems as a holistic part of their healing.
Dr. Amy, you've truly, truly changed my life. Truly, you have. Truly. You've changed me as a parent. You've changed me professionally. And you've healed me the fastest I've ever been healed. And I'm not saying I'm done, but the quantum shift I've experienced, really, it's speechless.
I've talked about the states of the nervous system with patients. I've gone over somatic exercises with patients that have had trauma. I am so excited to talk about the role of inflammation and those adaptive immune patterns, which I see in just about everybody I see, and just kind of that role of inflammation and what that looks like from a, kind of a blood sugar diet, movement, spending time in nature, the things that I can actually influence.
And I'm so thankful for all the other stuff that I know, but I honestly just really feel like this is the one thing they need to know.
I don't know. It's like the best. I tell people this is the best thing since sliced bread.
Discovering your work and fully embracing it myself has significantly expanded my capacity in all regards.
I have spent far too much time. I shouldn't admit how much time I've spent truly thinking, God, I love that woman. I love that woman. I love that woman.
The way I frame things with my clients of how overwhelming the world is for a baby. And when they realize that, especially the people that think, oh, I'm fine, my parents were fine. And it's like they realize the level of compassion that they have for themselves goes deeper. And then that becomes very healing for them, and understanding how the neurobiology takes time to develop, and rushing anything just as we're doing as adults, trying to rush our healing. That's not how we're wired in the beginning.
My clients know so much about you because they're like, how do you know all this? You're not a doctor. Because they ask me if I'm a doctor, and I'm like, no, I'm not a doctor, but my lingo has changed completely. Each module has helped me as a person, as a mother, as a wife, and especially as a counselor.
I thank you for all of this. It's amazing, and it helps my patients every day. And if I can just be a baby step for someone, like I said, I can see the hope in their eyes, and that's pretty wonderful.
It's the best course I've ever done, and I dislike online learning, but this has really changed my mind about it.
Honestly, much more empowered and much more capable, and all these things that I really actually have something amazing to offer my clients.
Basically, my capacity for my clients is so much bigger. And like the last person said, just giving that presence to them is such a gift that, I've trained in EMDR and all these modalities, and, he'll say, with the ocean, a safe place, and this and that. This is like bringing it home. Like, feel safe in your body.
With clients with chronic conditions who have often exhausted turning everywhere. And I support them in rewiring their nervous systems as a holistic part of their healing.
Dr. Amy, you've
Good
truly
morning.
changed my life. Truly, you have.
Good morning
Truly.
and welcome.
You've changed me as a parent.
I am so excited to
changed me
be kicking off
professionally.
the first session
And you've
for the
healed
medical
me the
track.
fastest I've ever been
And
healed. And I'm not saying I'm done.
We
but the
are
quantum shift
getting
I've
to work with
experienced,
technology
really,
this
it's
morning.
speechless.
I've talked
So
about
we're
the
gonna
states of
get
the
started
nervous
with
system
announcements and
patients.
get those
I've
out of the
gone
way
over
so that when we
somatic
have everything
exercises
ready,
with patients that have
we'll
had
be ready to
trauma.
get started
I'm
with
so
Bessel's
excited to talk
presentation.
about the role of inflammation.
First of
and those
all,
adaptive immune
I
patterns, which
would
I
like
see in
to
just about
ask you a
everybody
few
I see.
questions,
And
and
just kind of that
I have
role
a
of
big ask
inflammation
for
and
you.
I'm
Dr.
that looks
Amy.
like from a,
I'm going to be
you know,
the
kind of a
hostess
blood
for
sugar
this medical track for the
diet,
next 3 days.
movement,
And
spending
how
time in
many of you, by
nature,
show of
things
hands,
that
have
I
spoken
can
yourself,
actually
have been on a
influence?
stage,
And I'm so
or have
thankful for all
spoken
the
at
other stuff
some
that I know. But
event?
honestly,
Wonderful.
just
Then
really
you
feel like
will
this-
know
this
why
is
I'm
a-
going to ask us to do what I'm going to ask us to do. I would love for this audience to be like no other audience that the speakers get. So Bessel, Minta, just close your ears right now. This audience is going to be different and give the speakers a different experience than what they're going to get at the other places that they go and talk. What we are going to do is we are going to give them a standing ovation. when they come on and when they are done. I said to close your ears. But for those who are speakers, you know that feeling of being validated, of being appreciated. And I know that it's a lot of work to put all your things off of your lap and to have to stand up, but it's also good for your blood circulation and our learning experience. And so for many reasons, we're gonna do this. So we do need a few practice runs to really get this well rehearsed. And we're gonna do a few practice runs. So go ahead now and just get things off of your lap because we're gonna be practicing standing up. I'll give you the cue in. Let's have everybody be, because we want to do this, like as a group, right? Like we got to be coordinated here. So go ahead and have a seat, and we will do a few practice runs of just standing up for the speakers, both when I introduce them and when they are done. So just to get in the practice of standing up, I'll ask everyone to stand up who has a pet waiting for them at home. Stand up if you have a pet waiting for you at home. And turn to a person next to you and share what pet you have waiting for you at home. All right. Let's wrap up. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to practice some somatic work. So if you can hear me, go ahead and just do a VOO with me. Deep breath in. VOO. I knew we were done when I started to see people bring out their phones to show pictures of their pets at home. All right, have a seat. Show of hands, who here is familiar with somatic work, somatic experiencing? Lovely, we're going to be doing a lot of that. You thought this was the medical track. This is also going to be the mind-body medicine track. All right, go ahead and stand up. Hi, Ruby. Well, good morning. Good morning. Stand up if you were here last year at the Masters Events Conference. And now stand up if you were not here last year at the conference. All right, have a seat. Stand up if you are here to gain knowledge to apply to your work. And go ahead and turn to a person next to you and share who you are, where in the world you are, and what kind of work you do. And if you're not one of those, go ahead and share why you are here. All right, if you can hear me, go ahead and do a VOO. Deep breath in. VOO. We'll see who can hold their breath the longest. Let's do a push away with that view. So whether you're seated, whether you're staying up, you do what's right for you. If you want to sit down or if you want to stand up, whichever. But let's just go ahead and do a push away. So the way that I do a push away is I bring my hands up as close to my collarbones as I can, and I'm going to push. I'm going to be pushing with one arm since I've only got one arm with holding the mic with the other. But deep breath in. We'll do a view with a push away at the same time. I encourage you to go slow with the pushing away. Deep breath in. And just notice. Did that do anything for your body? Notice my shoulders come down a bit. All right, have a seat. And now stand up if you are here also for yourself. And turn to a person next to you. You're going to need to do it on both sides. And say, I'm so glad that you're here. All right, if you can hear me, take a deep breath in. And go ahead and have a seat. I was here last year. I was a speaker last year, and I am here for my work. I am also here for myself. My background is in addiction medicine. So I'm a double board certified physician in preventive medicine and addiction medicine. And I am the biology of trauma woman. So I'm a biology of trauma physician, biology of trauma educator. And this is what brings me to these conferences now, sharing and still very much learning and experiencing. But for me, the reason that I came into this was because I foster adopted while I was in medical school, and I was not prepared for all of what I was going to experience and learn, realized that I knew nothing of trauma or attachment, and as a physician, to be able to actually recognize that what I was learning in medical school was not actually helping that situation. And so I went on a journey. And that journey took me through surgery residency. So I did 4 years of general surgery residency and then switched to preventive medicine, addiction medicine. And now what I do is I teach on the cellular and the body's experience of trauma and the leverage points that we have then to shift one's biology to promote regulation. So that's me. And I'm going to ask a few of you to share who you are and why you're here. You are speaking on the panel, so why don't you stand up and share who you are and what you do.
Thank you, Amy. My name is Pratima. I am a functional medicine psychiatrist, and I, like Amy, believe that the body cannot be neglected in emotional and mental health. So that's why I'm here. Very excited about the panel.
And yes, she will be speaking on the panel this afternoon with Steve Porges and a number of people. So thank you. And why are you here? Go ahead and give us your name, where you are in the world, and why you are here. Go ahead and stand up.
Hi, I'm Marla. I am here from San Francisco. I am a psychotherapist in private practice, and I specialize in trauma work, so that's why I'm here. I also treat clients with polysubstance abuse.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Sabina. I'm a GP or family physician. I also work in a strategic role as a named GP for safeguarding children and adults. I'm very interested in how you bring it all together, like the holistic aspect with the functional aspects. So I will be coming to speak to a lot of people later, and how I can then influence my peers in how they approach trauma and health.
So rich, yes. How many here, show of hands, have that vision of being able to influence your peers? Yes, thank you for bringing that into the space. All right. Go ahead. Name, where you're from in the world, and why you're here.
Hi there, I'm Izet. I'm from Los Angeles, California in the US, and I'm here with my best friend and business partner. And it's been a dream of ours to just come and be and learn and be surrounded by people that are as intelligent and smarter than us. Cheers.
I am based out of San Diego. There's quite a few Californians here. We are representing. You want to share? Not really. That's okay.
Hi, my name is Carrie Cyrus. I'm with the Trauma Research Foundation, a part of Bessel Van Der Kolk's foundation. I'm the Chief Programs Officer. I'm delighted to be here. I've worked with Araminta and so many of you before, and I am here to learn for myself and meet everyone else too. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Would you like to share where you are in the world, what you do?
Hi, I'm Abby. I am visiting from Atlanta, Georgia in the United States. I am a psychotherapist in an unusual setting. I work in a neurorehabilitation hospital working with family members of our patients as they adjust to their role as a new caregiver.
I love the diversity of the group. Isn't that interesting? All right. Would you like to share?
Hello, my name is Harue. I'm originally from Brazil, but I live now in the UK. And I'm a life and business coach, and I see how this work is so important, how much there is so much to add and to share and to work together with other professionals as well. Yes. Thank you.
All right. Can you hear me okay? Microphone on? Hi guys, can you turn it? Thank you, great. The reason why it took so long is that they want to broadcast it, and we couldn't get it on the proper thing to broadcast it. So we'll go a little bit over time, if that's okay with you. Talking for 1 hour about trauma is a little bit talking about the nature of the universe in 15 minutes. But let me sort of put in a few things here. As you can see, I've been around for a while, and that has its disadvantages. It also has some advantages in that I was sort of present at the birth of the concept of trauma. We thought we invented something completely new, and it only took us a long time to realize that people had talked about it for a long time in different languages, in different contexts, etc., etc. But in 1980, when we created this diagnosis of PTSD, we called it an extraordinary event outside of the usual realm of human experience. And it tells you something about how limited we were in our understanding of the world. We thought it was extraordinary, and today we know that at least 1 out of 3 couples engages in physical violence, at least 1 out of 5 women has been sexually molested. It's extremely common. So it has been a very complex journey to get it accepted. And in some ways, when I go to a conference right now, here, I go, but now it has become inflated, and now everything becomes trauma. And that's not a good idea either. But so we put the diagnosis together. How did it happen? Everything in life is political. Everything in life has to do with social context. Yeah?
So we send you.
All right. Nice to have 2 projections. So it started in the US of A. Is the US a particularly traumatized country? Yes, but so is every other country in the world. But what was unique is America has by far the largest army in the world. And we have a big army, you use it. And so you start invading other countries. And then if you do that, people come home and they get hurt. Usually when people come home and they get hurt, as happened in the UK after the First World War, they got despised. In fact, in 1917, the diagnosis of shell shock, which was pervasive among soldiers in the UK, became a forbidden diagnosis. Nobody was allowed to talk about it. You're not allowed to write it in people's charts because it would undermine the motivation of the fighting forces of our great empire. I.e., if you know about trauma, you will want to stop killing people, and that would be terrible for the empire. So trauma always intersects with societal things and with, as we just talked about, colonialism, oppression, politics, etc., etc. One of my most profound experiences in the trauma field is that I was, in some ways, sort of the principal expert witness on behalf of victims of Catholic priest abuse. The blowback we got for that was unbelievable. They created a false memory syndrome. People like us were supposed to implant false memories of abuse by priests. And I lost half of my cases in the courtroom because the lawyers for the Catholic Church were able to convince the judge that this is all made up and it didn't really happen. And so the whole issue is, does it really happen or doesn't it really happen is very important. And in that case, starting with the military was easy because it was objective, it happened, and veterans do get benefits and are not despised these days. So people associated with a military diagnosis. Purely because of accidents. I happened to work in the VA, as did other people, but now we know that for every soldier who gets traumatized, there's at least 30 children in the world. And what children suffer from after having been abused and neglected is quite different from being a grown-up combat soldier who sees your best friend wake up. So we created this diagnosis. And I interviewed a lot of people at this point, and my patient said, my problem is I have become a monster. Nobody is safe with me. And I can't feel anything. I married this girl from high school, and she says she loves me, but I don't feel anything. And now we have babies, and objectively I think they're cute, but I can't feel anything for my children. And when they make too much noise, I blow up and become violent and angry, and I cannot sleep at night. And then I start drinking, and I lie on the couch all day trying to sleep. And then I blow up at people, and I am unfit for human consumption, basically. Now, how did we put that together in the diagnosis? We are working for the Veterans Administration, and we had to say, this is because of Vietnam. The complaint was not primarily about Vietnam. The complaint was, I have become a monster. So what we did, we made it a memory diagnosis. And we focused on nightmares and flashbacks because they were related to the war. Everything else was just behavior. And so we made it a memory diagnosis of something terrible has happened to you, and now it comes back in your dreams, and it comes back in your thoughts. But most of all, we didn't say that, it comes back in your behavior. And when you get traumatized, you continue to live as if it is happening again. And what we did not put in the original diagnosis, much to the detriment of the field, is that trauma is not about that event. That event is over. And that event just is over. The problem is that your mind doesn't know it's over. And the problem is that your mind gets rewired to perceive the current world as a dangerous place. So you reenact the trauma right now, here, and you don't know where it comes from. Why does your honey always blow up when something happens? She's just a nut, or she's just a crazy guy, or he's just an impulse-ridden person. And so they get diagnosis of bipolar illness and oppositional defiant disorder because you don't know why you behave the way you do, you just behave in a particular way. And then so when the trauma model comes in, people say, oh, it's about that event. Let's talk about that event. That's oftentimes very helpful and an important part. But more importantly, how can I help you to be fully alive right now? How can I help your mind to be here? And that's really what I'm going to talk about, because our definition that has become spread around the world has some really very serious problems. First of all, it's not an extraordinary event. Secondly, it is somewhat about memory, but not really. It's about that you are behaving right now as if you're being traumatized. And our diagnosis completely ignores another very important thing, namely, we are different people at different ages. And getting chronically abused by your parent or neglected by a parent is a completely different experience than being raped as a 45-year-old person by a stranger. And so your mind is different, your brain is different, your body is different, and we never paid attention to developmental level. I have, and I've written about 12 research papers on well over 40,000 kids, but we have never managed to bring the notion of development into the DSM or any diagnostic thing. And now people say, now we have complex PTSD. Yeah, that's what we proposed back in 1992 for the first time. And finally in 2022, it becomes, people say, oh, trauma may become more and more complex. Huh? So, no attention to developmental level. No attention to attachment status. The big issue with trauma is not what happened to you so much as who was there for you. By and large, we are an amazingly resilient species. We have crowded about every animal in the world except for cockroaches. We are very powerful people, and that's because we're able to form groups and tribes and families that protect each other. Margaret Mead said the first sign of civilization is that we found a person who had a broken bone from 10,000 years ago that healed. That means that person had some people around him who helped him to function even though his leg was broken. And so we are a collaborative species. And the big thing with trauma, as if you're clinicians, you see that all the time. Yes, something terrible has happened, but usually my dad or my mom did something to me. And by and large, if your mom or your dad are there for you, and for example, you get ill and you have a terrible experience, if you feel safe with your mom or your dad, you're going to be okay. It is really usually the interpersonal trauma, where people who you count on and people who are supposed to love you do terrible things to you, because what happens at this point, you can no longer talk. You can, like, we studied 9/11 very thoroughly in the US. Horrible event happened, almost no PTSD. Why was that? Because everybody acknowledged what had happened and nobody said it's your fault. And you could talk about it, and neighborhoods got together. After natural disasters, usually people do very well. In fact, they oftentimes do better because it creates group cohesion and collaboration and a sense of belonging. Rebecca Solnit wrote a book about it. So one trauma is not like another trauma, and the big trauma is interpersonal trauma, being traumatized by your close ones. The other thing that we left out, and Amy was hinting at, I was trying to fix that computer thing, is that trauma lives in the body. And as Darwin already pointed out in 1872, in his book Emotional Expression of Animals and Men, he said, trauma is experienced in heart-breaking and gut-wrenching sensations. You know that from experience. If something terrible happens to you, you get terrible news, somebody who you love dies or leaves you, you feel it in your chest. You feel it in your stomach. And that's, Darwin already talked about it back a long time ago. And once you start having these agonizing feelings in your body, you try to organize your life to not feel those feelings. What's the most common thing in certainly Europe of how to deal with horrible sensations? You take a swig. And so trauma and alcoholism are very highly correlated to each other. Trauma and addictions are very highly correlated to each other. In fact, the data show that it's just about impossible to become a drug abuser without having been abused as a child. It's almost a necessary condition. But the two of them don't get well together. And so why do people take drugs and drink? If I had a vial of heroin here, I said, hey guys, I have some heroin here. Just come up here, I'll give it to you. Most of you say, this guy is crazy. But if you feel desperate, if you don't know if you'll make it at the end of the day, you'll say, I would love some because I can't stand life anymore. People don't take heroin because they try to make you feel bad. They try to desperately feel better. And the whole fentanyl epidemic, which is huge in the US and probably huge in the UK, people don't talk about social conditions. You know, why do people take fentanyl? Because they feel like shit. You know, if you feel good about yourself, you'll go to dope yourself up with these substances. But what happens is you feel it in your body and you try to make those feelings go away, and a lot of people learn to wall it off, to not go there, not think about it, not talk about it, suppress it with pills, very much psychiatric pills also, but your mind can try to push it away, but your body won't. And so your body will continue to secrete the stress hormones and the cytokines and all the things that make you ill. And people who are traumatized die between 10 and 20 years earlier than people who are not traumatized. It sits in your body and your bodily systems. In our world, we have barely paid attention to this, and I hope that Dr. Amy will enlighten all of you about all of that and how the ultimate solution. I don't think so, but because we know so little about it at this point. But we need to work with the body. And in some ways, life has not improved in this regard, because when we put this diagnosis together back in 1980, I was still a young kid at the time, we said, you know, we need to create diagnosis in order to, we have these new psychiatric drugs, and now that we have the new drugs, we need to see what sort of things these drugs are good for. And so we created a diagnostic system I know how it's created. There are smoke-filled rooms. People still smoked in those days. And we would talk about cases and stories and say, let's put that in there. And let's put that in there. And let's call that a diagnosis. It's a completely non-scientific process, but we need to somehow find a way in which people in London and Boston and Los Angeles could talk to each other about similar people. In the first edition of that manual, the opening says, this is just a bunch of symptoms. They have no scientific validity, and they should never be used for insurance or forensic purposes. That sentence gets left out in subsequent editions, and now people think that the diagnoses that we live with exist. They're just victims of our imagination. And that doesn't, then people say, oh, I don't make diagnoses. And I say, in that case, I would never send anybody to you, because if you don't know what you're treating, you're just pissing in the wind. I can get rude from that. And so, yes, you need to make a diagnosis. You need to figure out what is wrong with this person and what can I do to fix it. But it won't be DSM diagnosis. Are you with me? And that is, so we are, I had some dental work this year. I'm so jealous of my dentist. He knows how to do stuff. He knows what he's talking about. He knows how to make an implant. This guy knows something. We know almost nothing. And the most important thing all of us need to say is, I don't know. I don't know. Let's try. And so the field develops. And the field was very, very exciting, discovering all kinds of things as happens here today. And then at some point, one of my colleagues says, I did an experiment, a study, and I showed that exposure treatment works for about half of the people who don't drop out, but about half of the people drop out. But as people often do, they overstate their cases. And I said, I did a great result with exposure treatment. And I write back to her, she sends an email, where I said, glory, hallelujah, now our jails will empty out. We will stop having wars because we have fixed the issue of trauma. And so we got this delusional system of evidence-based treatments. I know something about evidence-based treatments because I've done more research on more different methods than anybody else alive. I have. And I'm always astounded by colleagues of mine who started their career 40 years ago studying one particular thing that was never particularly helpful. And 40 years later, still studying the same thing. That's weird. So I've always been looking for what else can help people. And so how do you become an evidence-based treatment? By doing something that is acceptable by the powers that are. And if you do something that's not acceptable to the powers that are, you will not get money. And so it cannot become an evidence-based treatment. For example, it is very clear that making music together is very helpful for people. And I've been part of a movement in the US where finally people are studying music for the treatment of trauma. I go to Buenos Aires and I see people tango dancing. And I go like, wow. That's amazing. This is a very traumatized place. People left Europe for damn good reasons. A lot of violence going on. In Magellan Straits, people got killed by the thousands. What did people in Buenos Aires do? They invented the tango to be perfectly in tune with each other and connect with each other in pleasure and in joy. And I go, that's a trauma treatment. If any of you have a trust fund, I'd be very happy to organize a study on tango dancing versus cognitive behavioral therapy. It's an empirical question. I'm not saying that tango dancing is better than CBT, but I know that CBT doesn't work, so it's very likely that tango dancing will probably work better. So be skeptical about all these things. Be skeptical about anybody who says, I have the answer. The only thing you can say, what I do work for some people, some of the time. But people tend to become very fanatical. So I love these pictures of the Webb telescope. And when we sort of started the trauma stuff, that's what we could see of the universe out there. And that technology got better and better and better. And today the same universe looks like this. In the field of trauma, we are here. And I hope that 20 years from now, people will laugh their heads off about the stupid shit that we talked about here. And people say, they were so ignorant at that time. So don't overestimate what any of them. So I'm not going to show you this movie. I wish I could, but time is going to run out. But so how do you deal with trauma is you cut yourself off from your pain, you try not to feel something in your body, you feel deeply ashamed about yourself, you live things out on a bodily experience, and you try to combat them. So how does trauma express itself? In behaviors. And what we very clearly see is all these things at the bottom here, domestic violence, bullying, all that stuff is related to trauma. And like the A study showed that trauma is responsible for 2/3 of all depression. If we could do away with early childhood trauma, 2/3 of all rapes would stop, most domestic violence would stop. So the issue of safety in your upbringing is the most critical public health issue in the world. And a lot of kids in every country in the world are growing up with fear and dread and terror. I just weep for what's happening in Ukraine. I weep for what's happening in Gaza and the West Bank, and sometimes the East Bank also, of how are people going to deal with this? Because their whole biology will become a traumatic biology, and people will pay for generation after generation. These are huge issues. And what we keep leaving out is that interpersonal attachment is the critical issue that makes us feel safe. And so, maybe some of you saw this yesterday already, I got very interested in getting identity as a trauma victim. And I hear a little bit at this conference that makes me go like, already like, there's nothing worse than identifying yourself as a trauma victim. Nothing else in my life means anything, but I'm an incest survivor. I'm a child of alcoholics. I'm something, a combat veteran. If that becomes your identity, you develop an identity as a victim. And that sort of will keep you over there. So the question I got like, how can you help people whose identity has become, I'm a helpless victim, to change? And I was very inspired by a program in the county I live in the US, Berkshire County, Massachusetts. It's a program called Shakespeare in the Courts. And if you are a juvenile delinquent in our neighborhood, and you, let's say, steal my car, you go to the judge, and the judge says, you have a choice. You can either go to jail for 3 months, or you can become a Shakespeare actor, and every three times a week you have to show up to learn how to do a Shakespeare play. I live in a very civilized part of the world. I'm very proud of that. And what you see is these kids go to the Shakespeare theater, the worst goddamn actors you've ever seen in your life. But if you play a certain role, if you're a mighty king and you speak like a mighty king, you go like, oh, that's what it feels like to be a mighty king. And if you are an abused person and you play Lady Macbeth and you tell your husband, I want you to kill your boss so I can become queen. And he goes like, I didn't really want to kill my boss. And she says, you better watch it, buddy. I'll never have sex with you again unless you kill your king. And he goes like, and he goes, this woozy guy, and she says, if he had also resembled my father, I would have done the deed myself. And when you play these roles, you go like, wow, that is what it feels like to be a powerful person. And so in order to deal with your trauma, you need to have experiences, visceral experiences that directly contradict the helplessness of your trauma. Sitting on your butt talking how bad you feel will not do that. I'm not saying that talking isn't unimportant. Talking is the foundation of getting better because you need to know what you feel and know what happened to you. It's the first step on the road to recovery, but it's not the end. I showed all the data yesterday. I showed that knowing why you screwed up doesn't make you less screwed up. But you now get a perspective of yourself, and maybe you have somebody who is with you can help you to explore how to lead your life. Now, not replay the past over and again. And what we see in some other research that I don't have time to show you is that if you stay in your trauma mode, your brain gets very incapable of feeling pleasure, joy, and engagement. And so keeping people in their trauma and telling a trauma story over again is very destructive for people. Because in order to overcome trauma, you have to do something that gives you the opposite experience of what you felt when you were traumatized. Are you with me? I see some skeptical voices here. Could be skeptical. You should be. And so when my book was finished, to celebrate, we took an advanced Shakespeare acting course. 6 weeks, 7:30 in the morning till 10:30 at night, 6 days a week. Brutal. And there we meet a woman who has a baby, and 8 months later she sends a picture of her and her new baby to her friends. And this is her picture.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Hello.
And I love to look at you guys as you watch this tape. I've shown it in Cape Town, New Delhi, and Beijing, and they have the same responses in there. People start smiling and laughing. Why is that? Because this is the essence of us as human beings. This is who we become, who we are, by being seen, by being known, and being in tune with each other. People have known this forever. In order to help with trauma, people sing together. People march together. You join the US Marine Corps, you probably come from a very deprived alcoholic and violent family, not to cue the cop, and you march and you sing from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, and you feel like $1 million as you move together with other people. And so moving together, being in sync with people is a very important part of who we are. And the essence of trauma is, of course, that you feel something, you see, please don't hit me, please don't rape me, and people don't respond to you. And you're out of tune. And a very big piece of being a traumatized person is you're out of tune with yourself and the people around you. So how do you get in tune with people? I was advisor of the Truth Commission in South Africa, and I had the extraordinary privilege of traveling around with Bishop Tutu. It's 1994. And they got to independence, and they learned a lesson from India and Pakistan that were conceived in violence, and all the signs were that South Africa is going to be born with all the black people trying to the white people. I wouldn't have blamed them for it, but they were aware that this would be a terrible way to start our country. And so the job of the Truth Commission wasn't the truth. The job of the Truth Commission is to help people feel calm and safe and not enraged anymore, And Tutu was in charge of that. And I traveled about with Tutu. And he would go from township to township, and people would sit together, and they would sing together. And they would dance together. And they would pray together. And then Tutu said, horrible things have happened to you. Who would like to tell people what has happened to you? And somebody would get up and talk about some horrendous thing. And Tutu would stand and say, this is unbearable. Can we please get up and sing together? And we would sing together and dance together. And then when people were calm, he said, tell us more. Or would you like to tell us what's happened? And people get very aroused. Too painful. And he calmed people down. So what he did beautifully is pendulation. And you get to bite off a little bit, you process a little bit, and then you go back to a state of safety and joy. And so joy and safety is a very important part to cultivate. You cannot overcome your trauma unless you cultivate joy and pleasure also. Okay? So the attachment system is so critical, and this is also something that forms our brain. I mentioned this yesterday. This is a picture I got from Colwyn Trevarthen. How many people in this room know the work of Colwyn Trevarthen? To me, that is just stunning. Colwyn Trevarthen is a professor in Edinburgh who has studied the musicality between mothers and babies. It's so the core of attachment research, which almost no clinician I know knows anything about attachment research. How did that happen? That is what our world is about. That's what our work is about attachment. But we don't learn about attachment. And it is even more important because our brains are formed by attachment. And what Trevarthen shows so beautifully is that if you're a kid and somebody plays with you, you get to know, I'm a playable person. And if nobody plays with you, you get the sense of, I'm a frozen person and nobody wants to pay attention to you. I'm damaged, I'm empty, I feel nothing. Ruth Cohen is talking about it here at this conference. If you don't get that input and that visceral pleasure, you don't know who you are. And you don't know where you're going. Because the brain is a predictive organ. And if early in life you're met with love and care and playfulness, your brain gets organized to predict pleasure in future. And if you grow up with violence and rejection, you expect that, and that becomes who your brain are. And so the early experiences determine your brain, determine the connection with your brain, your interpretation of the world, your mental processes occur, how you see yourself, and how you organize your body. That's how the brain is formed. My good friend Marty Teicher, who is one of the world's foremost neuroscientists, did a study a few years ago where he looks at all the brain imaging studies that have been done in psychiatry. There have been billions of dollars of brain imaging studies, including some of ours on PTSD, and he discovers that if you control for abuse and neglect, none of these studies mean anything. The only thing that we know something about is how abuse and neglect particularly change the brain. That doesn't mean that schizophrenia and OCD are caused by trauma, but the only thing that we know about the neurobiology is about neurobiological trauma. Nothing else has ever yielded something. Huh? So our brain is formed by that, and our brain is formed by reciprocal interactions. So this is my colleague Andrew Meltzoff at the University of Washington. As a young guy, he's my age, he goes into a newborn nursery and he sticks out his tongue as a 5-hour-old baby. I hope you have a chance to do it yourself. I have a chance to replicate this experiment, and it works. If you have a 5-hour-old baby, there's nobody home yet. There's nothing there. a little pooping and a little crying, nothing else is going on. But he sticks out his tongue, and the baby sticks out his tongue. And he frowns, and the baby frowns. 5 hours after this baby is born. We are thoroughly, deeply social creatures. And that's who we are. And it alarms me enormously, and it should alarm you too, that screens are beginning to take over interpersonal interactions. I bet many people in this room, like I, do Zoom sessions for therapy. It is not the same as being with another person. Kids are being raised by computers. It has devastating consequences because computers give the same rewards as friendships do, but you don't have to do anything for it, and you don't learn reciprocity, and you don't learn compassion, and you don't learn how other people are feeling. It is probably our most devastating mental health, public health issue that we're facing, and people in our field are not talking about it, and we should. So we're imitative creatures, and I'm going to skip all of this because we have so little time, and I'm going to tell you about neurofeedback. We'll talk about it later. No, I'm going to first show you these slides. So, how many people were here yesterday already? Has heard me speak? Okay, so it's a handful. You can leave because most of what I'm going to talk about yesterday. But so I really got into this trauma stuff at the ground floor, and I know I love to write, love to do research stuff, and so I'd written 2 books, and I was widely recognized as one of the world's experts of trauma. There was a little thing missing at the end of the book. There was no treatment chapter. You didn't know how to treat it. A lot of the things you hear here, I would not call particularly helpful treatments either. And so we didn't know how to treat it. And then some people in my clinic start doing a bizarre thing. They start wiggling their fingers in front of people's faces. And we are a fledgling program at Harvard Medical School, and I want to be respectable. For God's sake, you can't do this work and try to be respectable. I say to my staff, stop that immediately. That's how I sounded. They're like, don't do this, don't do this. Emergency, you wiggling your fingers, we're trying to be respectable people. And I start lovely people, and they say, oh, sure, we won't do it anymore. And they secretly kept wiggling their fingers in front of people's faces and doing EMDR, a bizarre treatment if there ever was one. Anybody who does EMDR in this clinic? Delighted to see that. My position is, if you want to learn something about trauma therapy, learn EMDR. It gives you the biggest bang for your buck. It won't solve everything, but boy, is it one technique that will help people. You don't need to be brilliant, like Ericksonian hypnosis is probably great, but you need to be really exceptionally talented to do that. EMDR, pretty stupid. And so then EMDR is the first treatment I see that does not involve primarily the safety of the relationship. And of course, we all love the safety of the relationship, but if you have been chronically abused, you'll probably be very suspicious of anybody. And you'll be maybe the nicest person in the world, but people may hate your guts or be terrified of you because that's how their brain is organized, to see the world as a dangerous and terrifying place. And so sometimes we don't have warm, comfortable, little wheezy relationships with our patients, and you still need to help them. And EMDR can help. And the other thing I'm going to talk about also. So it doesn't depend on talking, it doesn't depend on telling a story, it doesn't develop a drug. It is just, you ask people to call up what they saw, what they heard, what they were thinking back there, and you don't ask people to talk. Why don't you ask people to talk? It's the moment you talk, it is an interactive process. We are incapable of saying something without thinking about what they will think about us, how will be received, will they like me, will they hate me for what I'm saying. So all talking is a filtered process. It's almost impossible for us to be honest talking to somebody else. And we always adjust our language to have a relationship with that person. But telling the truth to ourselves is extraordinarily difficult. So you just ask, what did you see? Don't have to tell me. But you hear the sensations. And you say to people, so stay there, notice that, and you move your eyes from side to side. And then something happens in the brain that is fascinating. And it's probably pretty much like what dreaming does to people. And dreaming actually is a very important function that we slowly learn, is that at night you go to bed, and why do you dream? You dream because your brain helps you to decide what we have learned yesterday, what is relevant and what's irrelevant. And our brain is dreams are a major function in helping us to organize what we are learning. What we do at night is terribly important. Way back in the late 70s, I was part of a study where we looked at traumatized people, and what we discovered was something called REM interruption insomnia, meaning you wake yourself up out of your dreams, and you don't dream when you have PTSD. Interesting finding. Didn't mean anything to us right now, but now in the past few years, my friend Robert Stickold and some other people have discovered why we dream. We dream in order to organize information and to move it into the past instead of the present. I know what it's like for people in the UK, but where I live, in March, beginning of March of the year, it gets to be really rough to have these long winters and darkness, etc. And you wake up and your car is snowed under again, and you go like, damn it, I hate it here. I'm going to go move to Florida, God forbid, because you don't have control over your own body in Florida. Like, what do? And you go to sleep, and the next morning you go, well, let's go to work. You have the experience sometimes? Yeah. That's what dreaming does for you. And if you cannot dream, you don't wake up much better. So the speculation is that EMDR sets up a dreaming type situation. And so here is, what happens at this point is that a senior postdoc of mine becomes the girlfriend of a junior professor at Yale. No, Yale. That's respectable. So we go listen to them. I'm at Harvard, Yale, so we don't have to hang out alone.
As I took it down last week.
So this is Steve Lazaroff, who shows me this movie, which I've shown at least 1,000 times, and I never tire of it. And he sits down with this traumatized person, long story, you don't have time for it, and the moment he asks her to talk about the trauma, her whole body starts reliving the trauma.
As I took it down last week. Start reading it.
She hasn't said a word yet, and her body has started to relive it. That's why I did not have a treatment chapter in my book, because if you go into it, people start reliving it. And what you need to do with trauma, you need to have enough distance from it to know that was then, this is now. And clearly, her body is experiencing it as it's happening now.
Please. I was at a red light on Cherry Street. I was in the left lane, going to take a left turn onto Gulf Street. I was fully stopped because my light was red and I was behind the white line. I couldn't understand why the traffic to my left also wasn't coming out. All of a sudden, I looked up and their flat wheels weren't even touching the ground. So I thought she was going to come through our windshield and then I was going to die.
And I'm horrified. This person is paying good money to get better, and she's just getting traumatized by reliving it. And I say to Steve, why you're showing me this lousy movie, which is the reason why I don't have a treatment chapter in my book, because people go into their trauma and they don't leave it behind at the end. And he says, just hold on. I'll show you the tape of the beginning of the third time I met with her after 2 sessions of EMDR.
Story is up.
And that's what she looks like after 2 sessions. But I'm not really a good body therapist yet, which I'm better at it now. And I go, holy shit. I've never seen a person in my office who in 2 sessions changed from that into a junior Buddha. And I'm particularly impressed with how she sits. Her shoulders are back. And you may not notice, but this is her sternocleidomastoid muscle, the muscle of curiosity. I look at you as much as you look at me, and I look at your sternocleidomastoid muscle, which tells me how interested you are in talking to me, listening to me. And the moment you like what I say, you go. And the moment you don't like what I say, you go like this. And so something has changed. When you're traumatized, you are not curious. Because when you're traumatized, everything new may kill you. You have a basic attitude that the world's not safe and people are going to hurt me. And clearly her body is wide open. So I'm looking at a safe body.
And what I want to do is, for the last time, I think we're kind of at the end and everything.
She moved her head forward. That doesn't happen in my office. When I see traumatized people, they go, huh?
Today, can you describe what happened that day for me?
Yeah, I was going up to a traffic light, turned yellow, and I was still back, so I was going slow to begin with because the roads were wet.
And I immediately go, what happened in her brain that she is now experiencing the past as if she's reading from a teleprompter? She's not here and not there, and before she went there. What is that process? Because this is the secret to the universe. How do we help people to be here and not there? Huh? I won't give you details of what we actually found.
Stopped behind the white line. The light was red. Traffic to my left isn't moving. Wondered why. Looked up. Saw a car come speeding at me. I just knew it was going to hit me and I was going to die. I didn't. It's fading. I can almost say right now, don't even ask me anything more about the accident because I'm not interested in discussing it. Not that I want to hide it, but I'm not. It's over.
Up to that point, I'd never seen it. I think the applause is justified. Huh? But this is remarkable. And so I see that and I go like, this is amazing. I've never seen somebody who said, it is over. And when you do research, you never ask people, is it over? You see, is there statistically significant change in people's PTSD score? Which is very different from, is it over? So this is the first time I see somebody who says, it is over. And I must honestly admit, I have not seen that in purely psychotherapeutic interventions since that time either. Although IFS comes close to being able to do it. But it's complicated. For people, so it's possible for people to say, it is over. And that's become the standard of my research work. Can people say at the end, it is over? The second thing is that EMDR is one bizarre treatment. Most people in this room grew up in Europe, and we know what helps people. And so if somebody says, I have the latest pill for trauma, nobody says, that's crazy. Because that's the culture we live in. I call it a post-alcoholic culture, where popping a pill in your mouth is normal. Wiggling your fingers is crazy. Tapping acupressure points is crazy. Doing Qigong is crazy. Doing Tai Chi is crazy. Doing like any of these things that doesn't fit with our paradigm. What we in our culture are good at, we know how to yak. Yak, 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 yak. That's what we're good at. And we know how to take pills. And then I go to China for the first time. And it's a bad place back then. Poverty, oppression, horrible. And I go to the park and I see everybody does Qigong. And what are these crazy people doing? Are they talking to their therapists about their mothers? And I join people in the park and I start doing Qigong. I go, that feels so much better. Interesting, these Chinese know something that we don't know. Interesting enough, China still does after not long ago. Every park is filled with people doing Qigong and Tai Chi. But in China, you cannot tell the truth. Absolutely not. So you can work with your body, but you also need to be able to tell the truth. And that's not possible in China. So you see these different cultural adaptations that people have in different places. So we do this research and we show how effective EMDR is, and it never changes the field. Why doesn't it change the field? Because EMDR is crazy. But I continue to be intrigued with crazy stuff. And so now I'm open. And people say, boy, this is all. It's good. So it all depends on, so I think, so this is crazy. Let's do the research, show how effective it is. And then people say, you know, that tapping acupressure points works. And I go, that's crazy. Let's do it. And then some people come to my clinic and say, you know, we're a bunch of yoga teachers and we have been doing yoga with rape victims and other traumatized people. And do you feel like studying it? And going like putting your butt in the air and twisting your spinal cord in a pretzel, treatment for PTSD. Yeah, that's crazy. Let's do it. Research shows that yoga is more effective for PTSD than any traditional psychiatric medications. But it doesn't fit into the paradigm. And then we start doing psychedelics, which I'll talk about for a second. So I'll give you an example of a beautiful program at St. Quentin Prison in California. Wait a second, just for the hell of it.
Twice a week, a small group of men inside San Quentin State Prison get together and practice hula. But not the touristy stuff you're probably thinking of. This is the cultural practice of hula, which is actually more like a moving meditation than a dance. And for a few inmates, it's helping in their rehabilitation.
So Kumu comes in and he's like, yeah, all right, guys, so get ready, I'm going to teach you hula. And he's like, hula?
Upu Ama was one of those men in the hula classes. He served a long sentence inside San Quentin.
I served 24 years for murder.
This is particularly close to my heart. It's part of my growing up in Hawaii. You may not know that about me, but I'm a mighty good hula dancer myself. Not anymore, probably. But St. Quentin has a spectacular trauma program. It's a prison in California that is truly what a prison should look like. They do yoga, they do Qigong, they do classes, they do neurofeedback. They're not quite ready for psychedelics yet, that's a little bit too far. But they really do a trauma-informed program. So it's possible. I don't have much time. I'm going to show you something very quickly. So at one point, a friend of mine, Alexander McFarlane in Australia, does an amazing piece of research about how traumatized persons versus non-traumatized people deal with ordinary non-traumatic information. And they put 38 normal Australians, if you ever been to Australia, filled with normal people, and some not so normal ones. And there's the normal people, and these are the 38 traumatized people. Then he does something like, he plays a sound like eh. And when I make a sound like eh, you have to figure out, what is he doing? Is he unwell? Is he trying to insult us? Is he lapsing into his native tongue? You need to somehow make sense of that so your brain gets to work. The non-traumatized people use their left brain, their cognitive brain, to figure out what it means. The traumatized people don't use their left brain. They don't use cognition. One of the most mysterious things for me is that how CBT got to be used for the treatment of PTSD, because it doesn't work. You should have learned it in school and not wait for 10 years or 15 years after you graduate from school. So there's no cognition, and it's the right brain, the emotional brain, that processes information. So when you're traumatized, how you feel is the only thing that matters, and what you think doesn't matter. It's a problem. And then what he shows is you can put electrodes over different parts of the skull and harvest the brain connection below that. I can actually do it with my little computer these days. And what you see is that when non-traumatized people get a stimulus like all the different parts of their brain, all these different colors, work together to create a coherent way of coping with the information. Traumatized people, the internal brain doesn't put things together properly. It's much harder to make sense out of what is going on. This is non-trauma. Okay? And then when you're not traumatized, you have a certain waveform. The first wave helps you to distinguish, is this relevant or not? Traumatized. You don't know what's relevant. So all kind of stuff comes in, and you don't know what's important or unimportant. You'll be very vulnerable, and it's the learning wave of the brain. And so that is an amazing piece of research, and we'll never solve this one. And then I learned about neurofeedback, and on Saturday, Bernard and Wondermoth and I will do an hour on neurofeedback where you tell you more, but that just gives you an inkling of what you can do. So I get introduced to neurofeedback, and this is a drawing of an 8-year-old boy, a family drawing. It's a bad drawing. You should do much better when you're 8 years old. And the kid is a very messed up kid. And people do 20 sessions, 10 weeks of neurofeedback with the kid, and that's his family drawing. And they do 20 more sessions, and that's his family drawing. And that is what I'm always looking for. Can what you do something that nothing else can do? And I don't know anything else that can do that, can make that. And so we learn about neurofeedback. I'll just play you one little tape to give you a preview of coming attractions.
He used to hit me and punch me and kick me and bite me. Hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD, was out of control. Older sister Cara was terrified.
What are you like now?
I'm happier. I'm able to concentrate. Yeah.
You get along with people better?
Yeah, I get along with my mum well.
Okay, Kane, I want you to get the green rocket ship to fire up.
After years of violent outbursts, finally relief in what looks to be a simple computer game.
It works for wishing, it works for mood disturbances, it works for panic. I've used it successfully with chronic pain, headaches.
It's called neurofeedback, a system where clinical psychologist Dr. Moshe Pearl says Kane's brainwaves are represented as different coloured spaceships.
Yellow. Stop the purple and the yellow rocket ships from firing up.
Dr. Pearl says electrodes on Kane's head sense when he's relaxed and focused, and as a result, the green spaceship speeds up, overtaking the other spaceships that show when he's tired or tense.
What he wants to do is get the rockets to go fast, so he teaches himself really to slow down.
absolutely excellent results, and it's been long term, and he's lost, like I would say, all his violence. Yes, I have a little boy now, and it's fabulous.
Don't stab me. Don't.
Looking back, Kane hardly recognises himself.
Can't believe I was like that.
Could you ever be like that again?
Nah.
You don't think so?
Even if I tried, I don't think I'd be able to do it.
Click the button anytime you see the white square.
Dr. Pearl tests Kane's attention span. After 60 neurofeedback sessions, his scores have doubled.
Maybe 1 in 10,000 children would have scored as poorly as he did. And now he's completely average.
So if you know how to do this already with a kid like that, don't learn neurofeedback. But if you don't, is it ethical to continue to charge people money if they could get better with that? So if you want to know more about this, Bernard and I will talk about it on Saturday. And I just want to give one sentence about what I've been spending the last 10 years on, which is psychedelic research. And we'll have some panel, but there's 6 people on the panel, and I won't be able to talk about it. So, and actually, our results on psychedelic studies are by far the best results I've ever seen. We just finished 3 studies, one of which won the prize for the most important scientific, one of the 10 most important scientific breakthroughs in the world in the past few years. And we study psychedelic agents for trauma. The specific agent we studied here was MDMA, called ecstasy. On MDMA, in the way we do it, and I don't have to tell you any details whatsoever, people don't have ecstatic experience by and large. They usually have very painful experience, and that MDMA makes it possible for people to go and feel their trauma. And so half of the people in these 3 very large studies got only very good 38 hours of psychotherapy, and the other half got 38 hours of psychotherapy and 3 MDMA sessions. I trained these clinicians. They are very good. And I thought that the therapy would be very powerful, and the MDMA could probably not make much of a difference. At the end, obviously, this is what therapy did for people with very good therapists. And this is what therapy plus MDMA did for people. I have never seen anything like it. And what is exciting about it, I'll just give you 2 brief coming attractions. One is that a very large number of people in this study, 88%, had chronic histories of childhood abuse and neglect. The sort of people who we don't think get better with our treatments. People got better. 2/3 of all people lost a diagnosis of PTSD. And most importantly, the paper that I was in charge of was that people's relationship to themselves changed. And so one of the big things about chronic trauma, starting early in life, is you feel chronically ashamed about yourself. You feel like you're defective. You expect that people will hate you, and you tend to hate yourself. Now, if there's anything that we as therapists, and I'm very much a therapist also, are proud of, we can be compassionate with people, and we can give them a self-compassion. The brown bars is the wonderful therapist, and the blue bar is therapy plus MDMA. We see remarkable changes in self-compassion. The typical reaction is people visit themselves as an abused child and say, oh my God, that is terrible what happened to that child back then. If I'd been there at that point, I would have done something, kicked the shit out of those people, whatever, and would never let this happen to this child. And the next thing people say is, I was that child because my father was a violent drunk and my mom this, and I feel so bad for my parents that they didn't get to enjoy this lovely child who was me. What more can you hope for in therapy? And so one thing after another showed that that MDMA is profoundly helpful for affect regulation, for dealing with interpersonal conflict. And so we did all these studies. The total cost of the studies was $163 million. And last month, the FDA, in a group of people who knew nothing about trauma and knew nothing about psychedelics, ruled that MDMA will continue to be an illegal drug and be ruled to be not useful for psychiatric purposes. As I said at the beginning, everything in life is political. And this is one of the most disastrous political things that's happening. It will continue. I'm sure there will be psychedelic treatments, but it will go underground, which is not a good thing at all. So let's hear it for regulatory agencies and mainstream psychiatry. Thank you. I need to run to my next presentation. I was late here, so I don't want to be late again. Yeah, you have to run.
No picture. You don't have pictures. Just as
No,
a heads up,
I don't
schedule,
time.
our
Don't
next
time.
talk in this room
Sure.
is on neuroplasticity and trauma therapy and how to enhance the mental capacity. That's at 1:30 p.m. Have a great break.